Hey folks, Nick here from another BookTube channel. Welcome to the continuation of the Swamp Thing read-along, where I'm reading every issue of Swamp Thing that was written by Alan Moore. This is Swamp Thing number 21, and even though this is the second issue of Moore's run, it really does feel more like this is his first book. This is really where his story begins and where his stamp gets to be put down on the character. And he does so in a really big way, which we're going to get into here. First, we'll take a quick look at the front cover by Tom Yates. It's a pretty good one. I really like the stark contrast of the colors, and it's obviously Swamp Thing chasing after this guy, hunting him down. The green of Swamp Thing, the blue of his suit work really well against the yellow of the light coming in through the window. This guy is definitely in trouble. And I think we're going to see why on the interiors. You'll also notice my copy is signed. I've got John Totlebin's signature right there. It's a great signature. Beautiful. This is a prized book of mine, so I'm going to treat it with care. But we are going to open it up and read it, because comics are meant to be read. So here we go. Here's our title page for the anatomy lesson. Script by Alan Moore, art by Steve Bissette and John Totleben. In this opening, we're introduced to Dr. Jason Woodrue, who's also known as the Floronic Man. He's another human-plant hybrid character. He is evil. He's been recently sprung out of jail by General Sunderland. Now, right before this issue, just a quick recap of issue 20, Swamp Thing was gunned down by Sunderland's men, presumed dead. He was just full of bullets. So they collected his body, and now Jason Woodrue has been brought in. Really great opening page of Woodrue. Lots of blues, and lots of cool blues as there's rain falling in Washington, D.C., but it's also offset with the extreme reds of the wine he's drinking and this bloody scene that we don't have context for yet, but we will get to very shortly. I also like that the logo here is a riff on Anatomy of a Murder's poster, the classic poster for that. So that's a pretty cool Easter egg. Close-ups of eyes. Eyes are a motif in this issue. Keep an eye out for emphasis on eyeballs. But here we're getting Sunderland bringing Jason Woodrue into his state-of-the-art building and lab to show him the body of Swamp Thing. The reason he's brought him here is to perform the autopsy. Jason Woodrue is, as a half-plant man himself, he is a bit of an expert in human-plant anatomy. So he's brought him in to do the autopsy to try to find out what makes Swamp Thing tick. How was he what he was? How was he a walking swamp monster? Just look at this panel here real quick. Tell me that this isn't inspired by that famous image of Boris Karloff as Frankenstein. I'd be really surprised if Stephen Bissette wasn't referencing Karloff on that panel there. It just, to me, it looks so much like it. All right, so on this page here, Sunderland is giving Woodrue a history lesson in Swamp Thing's origin, because usually when you bring in a new writer on a series, there's a good chance you're getting new readers as well. So we have to give some background for the character so that people can be caught up. So we get the general gist here. Swamp Thing was originally a man named Alec Holland. He was doing some government research, working on a biorestorative formula which was intended to promote crop growth. Basically, this formula, you could put it anywhere and plants would grow. It was supposed to, cure world hunger, stuff like that. But the lab was sabotaged, and Alec and his wife Linda, who was working on the formula with him, she was killed, but Alec was turned into Swamp Thing. Sunderland's explaining here that he dug up Linda's body because he figured, what happened to Alec why didn't it happen to her? And he confirms that they never found anything weird with Linda's body. It's only Alec that this happened to. And so he's trying to find out why. On this page here, we get a first glimpse at Jason Woodrow's true form. His skin is synthetic, so he kind of melts it off here. Sunderland asks for a display, so we get to see his actual hands are this kind of yellowish brown branch tree material. We'll see a lot more of that very shortly. But basically, Jason is trying to stay out of jail, so he'll do whatever Sunderland says. So, yeah, he's ready to start the autopsy. And that's what we get here. We start to see the autopsy in progress, and Dr. Woodrow starts pulling out parts from inside of Swamp Thing that look like human anatomy parts. He pulls out lungs that don't actually function as lungs. He pulls out a brain that doesn't appear to have the function of a brain. He pulls out a heart, he pulls out kidneys, and he's trying to figure out, what does this mean? Like, why would all of these things be here if they don't function? And how does that factor into what makes Swamp Thing tick? This scene here, Sunderland is walking Woodrow around the building. Sunderland is very wealthy and arrogant, and he really likes to show off like how impenetrable his building is. Like, he's really proud of his security systems. He's got a computer in his office that controls everything in the entire building. This is 1984, by the way, so this is cutting edge stuff for them. And Woodrow is just like, whatever, he's taking it because he can't really talk back at this point. We also get Woodrow a hot shower scene here, only as an excuse to see his true form. And this is why you bring Stephen Bissette into your book. This just melting face, just absolute disgusting, all the pockmarks. This is really, this is what this title's all about. I love seeing this type of stuff. And again, we get kind of a strong emphasis on eyes here. And on the bottom, we're seeing the cryogenically frozen Swamp Thing, but there is a green tendril that is broken through, and it appears to be growing out. I wonder how that happened. Let's read on and find out more. So on this page, Dr. Woodrow is explaining to Sunderland his findings. He has come up with a theory that he's pretty sure is correct, and he starts talking about planarian worms. And he talks about an experiment where a planarian worm was trained to go through a maze. He was taught how to navigate a maze. And then the worm was killed and chopped up and fed to other planarian worms that did not receive training on how to get through the maze. But by ingesting their friend who knew how to get through, they absorbed that knowledge and were able to complete the maze on their own. And so Dr. Woodrow is theorizing here that this is actually what happened to Alec Holland. That in the explosion that coated him in his own biorestorative formula, as he hit the swamps, his body decomposed, but the formula spread out into the swampland, and all that vegetation and all that plant life absorbed the formula and then absorbed Alec himself. And the plants around him basically cannibalized him and was infected with his consciousness. And Moore explains it really beautifully here. So for this, I'm just going to read it in Moore's own words. Imagine that cloudy, confused intelligence, possibly with only the vaguest notion of self, trying to make sense of its new environment, gradually shaping the plant cells that it now inhabits into a shape that it's more comfortable with. It remembers having bones, and so it builds itself a skeleton of wood. It remembers having muscle and constructs muscle from supple plant fiber. It remembers having lungs and a heart and a brain, and it does its best to duplicate them. You see, we were wrong, General. We thought the Swamp Thing was Alec Holland, somehow transformed into a plant. It wasn't. It was a plant that thought it was Alec Holland. And so upon hearing this theory, Sunderland stops Woodrow and says, "Great, you did great work, but now I no longer have any use for you, so, your contract is terminated, and, get out of here." Woodrue is trying to tell him, like, one more thing. Like, hey, if that's a plant down there, then... But he keeps getting cut off by Woodrue. He keeps getting cut off by Sunderland. And Sunderland basically says, get out of here first thing in the morning, whatever. And he leaves the room. But he leaves Woodrue alone with his all-powerful computer in his office. And that is going to be a problem for Sunderland. Because with that computer... Woodrue now has control of everything in the building, including the thermostats for the freezer unit and the doors. And we see that green tendril is now gotten even bigger, and there's more growth coming from Swamp Thing. So now we know that that's what we were seeing earlier. We were seeing a little preview of the revenge that Jason Woodrue had for Sunderland, who's screwing him over here. And we have another fantastic page. This is Woodrue relishing in his victory. Another close-up of an eyeball there. And he's explaining here what he's thinking, and it just reads so well. I'm just going to go through it word by word. I am thinking about the old man. He'll stay late when everyone has gone. Perhaps he'll read through the notes he wouldn't permit me to keep, skipping the big words. And then maybe he'll take a stroll like every other night. A stroll around the biggest dollhouse in the world. He'll punch one of his little buttons to switch the door mechanisms to manual while he's away from his checkerboard. And then he'll strut proudly down the hall and think how lucky he is to have all of this. He should have let me finish. He should have listened. Then I'd have been able to explain the most important thing of all to him. I'd have been able to explain that you can't kill a vegetable by shooting it through the head. So Woodrue is thawing out Swamp Thing and basically leading Sunderland right to him. And we get this great moment where Swamp Thing's eye regains its consciousness. It's filled with that red. And Sunderland finds the empty cryogenic freezer. He runs back to his office only to find Swamp Thing has beaten him there. We get a great look at Bissette's Swamp Thing. Just these crazy, just branching... like just green vines, and it's such a great look. I love Swamp Thing's nose. He always has this canopy over it, so his mouth is very often shaded in black, and it's it's offset by the red of the eyes. It's an awesome look. It's one of the best things about the character, just aesthetically. And what Swamp Thing has done here is he has read the file that Woodrue has prepared. And he has learned that he is not a man, he was never a man, and he will never be a man. And he is crazed with the knowledge. We get, again, these very strong, intense close-ups on the eyes. Also his mouth, just that rictus smile. And he is just furious. I love this monstrous arm, too. Again, another close-up of the vines that are coming off of him. And now we get a show of power. This is a monster book after all, ladies and gentlemen, and we get to see it here. This is a monster, unhinged, unleashed, chasing down Sunderland. He's breaking through the glass doors, smashing things up. He doesn't have veins because he's not a man, but he's got... That's what you could do with these green branchings, this vegetation that's all over him. You can make muscular, arms with that, even without true flesh. And you just see that here. He's just extremely powerful. And he's chasing Sunderland all through his building, which Woodrue has basically locked down. And now Sunderland cannot escape from the wrath of the Swamp Thing. And we get more narration here from Jason Woodrue, who is, trying to... He's musing on what must be going through Swamp Thing's head right now. And I'll just read that to you. You see, throughout his miserable existence, the only thing that could have kept him sane was the hope that he might one day regain his humanity. The knowledge that under all that slime, he was still Alec Holland. But if he's read my notes, he'll know that just isn't true. He isn't Alec Holland. He never will be Alec Holland. He never was Alec Holland. He's just a ghost dressed in weeds. I wonder how he'll take it, and I wonder how the old man will take it when the doors won't open. Chilling horror writing. This is amazing stuff from a monthly comic book from DC at the time. And this is absolutely next level. This is the stuff that changed the game forever. This is awesome. And here Swamp Thing catches Sunderland, and he just straight up kills him. That's another cool thing about Swamp Thing. Morality doesn't have a whole lot to do with it. But, I mean, Sunderland is a bad guy, so it's kind of cool. But Swamp Thing's not going to be like Batman, put him in jail. He's going to break his neck. He's going to suffocate him. He's going to do whatever he wants. And we close with Woodrue, again, sipping wine by the window as the rain falls heavily in his true form. And we close. Alan Moore loves to do this. He loves to kind of bookend things. He ends with the same line we opened with, "It's raining in Washington tonight." And we close with "It's raining in Washington tonight." Next up, Swamped. So that is it. Issue number 21 of Swamp Thing by Alan Moore. What did you think of that one? This is a seminal issue. This was a really, really important one. The anatomy lesson is basically legendary. It's one of the best single issues of comics probably ever written, but I'm probably going to say that a lot as we go through this project. So let me know your thoughts in the comment below. Let me know if I missed anything. Thank you very much for spending some time with me today, but now it's time to get back to reading.